Okay, folks, buckle up because we're diving headfirst into Ezekiel 10.
Oh yeah, this one,
We're talking vivid
it's
visions.
a wild ride.
Wild symbolism galore. Think spiritual action movie, but like way more depth.
Totally. The imagery's off the charts.
Right.
We're dropped right in with the prophet Ezekiel, who's, remember, living in exile in Babylon.
Oh, right. Exile.
Exactly.
Tough time.
But he gets this vision.
Yeah.
It's almost like a live feed beamed straight from back home in Jerusalem.
Whoa, trippy.
Right. And it all centers on the temple.
Okay, so thousands of miles away,
Yeah.
Ezekiel suddenly right there in the thick of it.
Front row seat.
Front row, VIP. So what's the first thing that pops up in this divine show?
A throne. Ezekiel sees these majestic beings called cherubim. And get this, right above them, on what's called the firmament, boom, this throne appears.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah. It's like poof, pretty much. And it's not just any throne. It's gleaming like straight up sapphire.
Okay, so not your average lawn chair. We're talking fancy.
Not even close.
What's the significance of the sapphire throne? Like, what message is that sending?
Great question. See, back then, sapphire, it wasn't about beauty. It was about power.
Oh.
It was linked to divine judgment, authority.
Heavy stuff.
Exactly. So right off the bat, Ezekiel and us were being told, listen up. This is serious business.
Yeah, no messing around. Things are
Right.
definitely heating up. And not just figuratively, because next up, a man clothed in linen. He's popped up before in Ezekiel, right?
Mm-hmm. Familiar face.
Okay, so he's told to take burning coals, and not just any coals, but specifically from between the cherubim.
Yeah, it's specific.
And that just feels like, I don't know, it intensifies things, doesn't it?
For sure. This isn't your backyard barbecue.
Right, exactly.
This fire, it represents something deeper. It's God's holy presence
Okay.
and the weight of going against it.
I see.
Fire purifies, but it also, consumes.
It destroys.
Exactly. So it's this powerful image
Right.
of divine judgment confronting human sin.
Wow. Heavy stuff.
Yeah. It makes you think, like, what choices led to this? What happens when that fire gets unleashed?
Yeah, big questions.
Definitely.
But before we get to that, there's this one detail that stuck with me. It says the man gathers the coals in his hands.
Oh, good catch.
I thought so.
It's easy to miss. But you're right. It's crucial
I thought so.
because even though it's divine judgment, it's being carried out by a human. You see,
Right.
that back and forth.
It's like a partnership almost.
In a way,
Whoa.
it's a huge theme throughout Ezekiel, that divine and human working together.
It's like it's not some far-off force,
Yeah.
It's happening on a personal level.
Right?
Through choices, through actions. That's kind of a lot to chew on, isn't it?
It really is. And this is where the emotion comes in.
Oh.
You'd expect, what, a swift judgment? Right.
Yeah, like boom, that's it.
Right. But it's not like that at all.
Oh.
Instead, it's this slow, deliberate departure.
Really?
Yeah, Ezekiel describes it so vividly.
Okay, how so?
The cloud, which represents God's presence, it starts to fill the temple, and then slowly, God's glory, it starts moving toward the threshold.
So it's like it's drawn out.
Exactly.
Man, that's almost heartbreaking. Like watching someone you love about to walk out the door and you just, they might not come back.
That's a really powerful image.
Right. Makes you feel like this isn't something God takes lightly. You know what I mean?
You're picking up on something really important there. This gradual withdrawal. It's like even God is hesitant to completely abandon his people.
Wow. That's profound.
Right. And it really speaks to God's character.
Like what?
This isn't the God who enjoys punishment.
Yeah.
This is a God who grieves over the choices his people have made.
So even in this moment of judgment, there's this deep love. Like a reluctance to give up completely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We often box God's judgment into this harsh, unforgiving thing, but Ezekiel shows us another side, one that's full of sorrow, longing even.
Really makes you think.
Right. And that's something we could all relate to, don't you think?
It really does make you think, about those times in your own life where you've messed up,
Yeah.
where you feel like things are falling apart.
Yeah, those times when you feel like maybe you're drifting away from what matters most.
Exactly. And it's not always so simple, right?
Yeah.
Finding your way back.
Not at all. Life's messy like that. But sometimes just sitting with those feelings, those difficult questions, that's where the growth happens,
Right, like Ezekiel's doing here, bearing witness to all this.
Yeah.
And speaking of witnessing, we've got to talk about these visuals, man.
Oh, yeah, the imagery in this chapter.
Just next level.
It really is.
It's not just a cloud and a doorway. We've got these incredible beings, the cherubim, and get this, They've got wheels within wheels, wheels within wheels.
It's a lot to unpack, that's for sure.
Right. You almost need a 3D model just to picture it.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But think about it, in Ezekiel's time, they wouldn't have been thinking, oh, cool special effects.
True.
These wheels, they represent something way deeper. They symbolize God's omnipresence.
Omnipresence, like he's everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah. And omniscience, too.
So he sees everything.
Sees it all. And those wheels, they can move instantly, any direction, showing that nothing's out of God's reach.
Whoa, okay, so it's like that saying, you can run but you can't hide.
Exactly. You got it.
Except here, it's less about hiding and more about this constant, unwavering presence.
Right, exactly. And to drive that point home even further,
Yeah.
the wheels, they're covered in eyes.
Eyes. Okay, now that's kind of creepy.
Maybe a little, but it really emphasizes that everything's seen, everything's known. Like, even though judgment is coming, God's not surprised. He's been watching this unfold the entire time.
Okay, so we've got these wheels constantly moving, always watching, symbolizing God's unstoppable presence. And then we have this moment. A hand comes out from beneath the cherubim's wings. It's like, I don't know, a divine relay race, passing the torch.
I love that image, the divine relay race.
Right. Passing the torch, or in this case, those burning coals of judgment, right, to the man in linen. And it takes us back to that human element again, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You're spot on.
Yeah.
Remember earlier when we were talking about those hands beneath the cherubim's wings, how they looked human?
Oh, yeah, yeah. And how even with all this divine power, there's still this element of human action involved. Like, it's not all predetermined.
Right. Exactly. We often try to figure out how free will and God's plan work together, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Ezekiel, he gives us this picture, this tension played out through those hands. It's both God's judgment, which is righteous and true, but it's also being carried out through human choice.
It's kind of a tough pill to swallow, you know.
It is. It is. It's a complex truth, that's for sure.
Really makes you think about the impact of your choices.
It does.
That we're not just acting for ourselves, we're part of something way bigger.
Absolutely. And, you know, speaking of stories, there's this one detail in the vision that I think often gets missed, but is really important. It's how God's glory leaves the temple through the east gate.
You know, I'll be honest, when I read that, I was like, oh, okay, so it's a gate. What's the big deal?
Right. It seems kind of random, but trust me, it's not. You see, in ancient Near Eastern culture, directions, they weren't just directions.
Oh.
They were super significant, especially in prophetic language.
Yeah.
And the East, that held a very specific meaning.
Okay, all right, you got me. What's so special about the East?
Well, think about it. What happens in the East?
The sun rises.
Exactly. It represents new beginnings.
Okay.
Hope, the promise of a fresh start.
So even in this moment of judgment, with God's presence leaving his temple, there's this hint of something more to come. Like, it's not just the end.
Exactly. It would have been easy, expected even, for God's glory to leave some other way. But by going out the east, it's like Ezekiel's leaving this little seed of hope. Even after all this devastation, there's still potential for restoration, for renewal.
Yeah, it's like those movies, you know, where the hero walks off into the sunset and you're like, wait, what's next?
Right. Like the story's not over, but it's this open question.
Exactly. And to think about that with God, it's kind of mind-blowing, isn't it? That even as he's leaving, he's still, in a way, present.
It really is. We try to put God in a box, don't
We do. We do. We like those neat little categories.
Right. But Ezekiel, he blows that wide open.
He does.
He shows us God's presence. It's dynamic.
Okay.
It's unpredictable. Doesn't fit in our neat little boxes, you know?
No, he doesn't. And that image of those wheels, those crazy wheels within wheels, always moving, always watcher. It's like, yeah, God's glory might have left the temple, but that divine energy, it's still out there.
Absolutely. It's still in motion, doing its thing.
It makes you think, like, where is it going next? And what does that mean for us today?
The million-dollar question, right?
Mm-hmm.
If God's not limited to a building, then where is he?
Right. Exactly.
Could it be? Maybe. He's closer than we think.
Oh, I like that.
Even within us.
Ooh, yeah, like that saying, God is where you find him.
Right.
But maybe it's not even just about finding God, you know?
Oh, tell me more.
Maybe it's realizing that he was never really gone in the first place. It's just sometimes we need those East Gate moments, you know, those times when things fall apart to help us see clearly again.
Yes. It's so easy to go through life on autopilot, assuming we've got God all figured out.
We do.
Right. But Ezekiel, he reminds us, God is always on the move.
Always a step ahead.
Always a step ahead. And those times we feel most lost, most uncertain, those might be the times when God's inviting us to step out of our comfort zones and really experience his presence in a new way.
So we've journeyed through this intense vision, all the fiery judgment, all the symbolism. We've seen God's glory leave the temple, the consequences of turning away from what matters. But even in that departure, there's this little glimmer of hope, right? Like even when things seem totally broken, God's still in the business of putting things back together. New beginnings.
Absolutely. And maybe, just maybe, we're part of that restoration. Maybe the real question isn't where's God's presence going, but what will we do with his presence in our own lives? How can we be those hands that bring healing and hope to a world that desperately needs it?
Yeah, that's a thought. Ezekiel 10. A whirlwind of images, a serious message about our choices, and yet ultimately a story that leaves us with more hope than despair. A good reminder that even when we don't see it, even when we don't feel it, God's still at work. Through us, moving us towards a future that's full of possibility.
Amen to that.
So next time you're going through a rough patch, remember that East Gate, all right? Remember, every ending brings a chance for a brand new start, a chance to get back to what matters and be part of something bigger.
That's what it's all about.
That is what it's all about. This deep dive into Ezekiel 10, it reminds us that even in the chaos, even in the uncertainty, God's story, our story, it's still being written.
And what a story it is.
It really is. So until next time, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.